Imagine a world where love is nothing more than a business transaction, a high-stakes gamble played by the wealthy and powerful. What happens when a ruthless tycoon, known for his calculated moves, decides to take a risky bet? A marriage, not for love, but for gain? He's about to marry someone who could give him everything he's ever wanted: wealth, influence, and a legacy that would last for generations. But what he doesn't know is that this decision is about to set off a chain of events that no one saw coming. As the tycoon dives deeper into the plan, the lines between business and personal blur in unexpected ways. He believes he's in control, but sometimes the heart has its own agenda. Secrets begin to surface, alliances are tested, and soon, the marriage that was supposed to secure his future starts unraveling, threatening to take everything he's worked for. Just when he thinks he has a handle on the situation, an unexpected twist turns everything upside down, leaving him and everyone around him questioning whether this was ever about business at all. What happens next will leave you on the edge of your seat. Stay tuned to find out what happens when the tycoon realizes the cost of his gamble might be higher than he ever imagined. Will he be able to salvage what's left of his empire, or is he about to lose it all? The tycoon had always been a man who prided himself on control. His empire was built on calculated risks, meticulous plans, and a relentless pursuit of power. Everything in his life, from his businesses to his personal relationships, had been designed to maximize profit, influence, and success. So, when the idea of marrying for gain was presented to him, it seemed like nothing more than a smart move. A means to solidify his position in the business world, to join forces with a family that held resources he could leverage to expand his already vast wealth. At first, it was simple. The bride was perfect for the role, young, beautiful, and from an influential family. She brought connections and power, a flawless addition to his already impressive portfolio. But what he hadn't anticipated was how quickly emotions would complicate everything. For him, the marriage was a contract, a transaction. For her, it wasn't so straightforward. While the tycoon kept his eyes firmly fixed on the future, his bride started to see the marriage differently. She wasn't just a pawn in his game, she had her own dreams, her own plans, and they weren't just about consolidating power or wealth. She had ambitions of her own, goals that didn't align with the tycoon's cold calculations. As the wedding day approached, she began to have doubts. Was this really the life she had imagined? Or was she simply being used to further someone else's agenda? Her family, too, had their own stake in this arrangement. While they were delighted at the prospect of joining forces with such a powerful man, there were whispers in the halls, concerns about how this union might end up being more of a trap than a blessing. Some feared that the tycoon's charm was a fade, hiding the darker truth beneath a truth that, if exposed, could bring everything crashing down. Meanwhile, the tycoon's closest business partner, a shrewd and calculating individual with an eye for opportunity, began to see cracks in the plan. He had been on the inside for years, advising the tycoon on nearly every major decision. But now, he was questioning whether this marriage would really benefit them in the long run. Was the tycoon's heart in it, or was this all just another power play? The partner knew that if the marriage didn't go as planned, it could not only ruin the tycoon's reputation, but also shake the foundations of their entire business empire. The risks were multiplying by the day. Behind closed doors, the tycoon's own family wasn't fully supportive either. His parents, who had always been the silent but ever-present backbone of his life, voiced their concerns. They saw the marriage as an alliance that would ultimately bring more chaos than stability. They had seen their son grow into the powerful figure he was today, but they hadn't anticipated the emotional fallout that this calculated move might cause. They feared it would cost him more than just his peace of mind. As the days drew closer to the wedding, the tension in the air became palpable. The Tycoon's bride began to retreat into herself, questioning every decision she'd made that had led her to this point. She no longer saw the marriage as a simple transaction, but as a life-altering commitment, one that might change her future in ways she couldn't foresee. And yet, her family continued to push her toward the wedding, seeing only the potential benefits that came with such an alliance. The business partner, sensing the growing strain on both sides, began to investigate ways to take advantage of the situation. While he outwardly supported the Tycoon, he was carefully maneuvering behind the scenes. If things went awry, he would be ready to step in and claim his own piece of the empire, even if it meant exploiting the cracks in the marriage to his advantage. He knew that the Tycoon's pride and desire for control could blind him to the truth, and that's exactly what he was counting on. Meanwhile, the bride's family began to push for more influence in the marriage. They wanted their daughter to secure her place in this new world, to ensure that she would hold more than just a symbolic role as the Tycoon's wife. They believed that if she played her cards right, she could rise to power alongside him, maybe even outgrow him. It was no longer just about securing their daughter's future. It was about solidifying their position in the high-stakes world of business, where every connection was an opportunity and every move was a calculated risk. But the unexpected twist came when the Tycoon started to notice the changes in his bride. Her behavior became increasingly erratic. She would withdraw into herself at times, lost in thoughts he couldn't penetrate. At other moments, she would lash out at him, challenging his every decision. It was becoming harder to maintain the illusion of a smooth, perfect partnership. And then, one day, she disappeared. The Tycoon was left reeling. His plans were suddenly thrown into disarray. How could she leave? How could she betray him at such a crucial moment? But it wasn't just the sudden disappearance that threw him off balance. It was the message she left behind, a single line of text. A question that seemed to pierce his carefully constructed world. "Do you even know who I am?" At first, he brushed it off as an emotional outburst, a product of the pressure and stress of the impending wedding. But as the days went on, the question haunted him. Did he really know her? Or had he been so focused on the marriage as a business deal that he had overlooked everything else? He couldn't afford to waste time on doubt. If he was going to maintain control, he needed to find her and bring her back. But things weren't as simple as they seemed. His bride had gone underground, disappearing into the shadows with no trace of where she had gone or who she might be with. The Tycoon's search began to spiral, and he found himself relying on people he never thought he'd need: private investigators, spies, even his own business rivals to track her down. As he plunged deeper into the mystery, he uncovered secrets about her past that he hadn't anticipated. It wasn't just the marriage that was at risk, it was his entire empire. Pieces of a puzzle began to form, and they didn't paint a picture of a simple girl from an influential family. No, she was much more than that. There were hidden connections, dark alliances, and unresolved debts that threatened to pull the rug out from under everything he had worked for. The more he learned, the more he realized that he was entangled in something far more dangerous than he had ever imagined. Could this marriage be part of a larger scheme to bring him down? Was she the key to a power struggle that reached far beyond their personal lives? As the stakes grew higher, so did the risks, and the Tycoon found himself caught in a web of deceit, betrayal, and power plays that he might not be able to escape. The tension was thick, and with every passing day, the clock ticked closer to the wedding. The Tycoon's world was crumbling, piece by piece, and no one knew who could be trusted. Each ally could turn out to be a foe in disguise. Each decision could send him further into a spiral he couldn't control. Would he find his bride before it was too late? Or was the game already lost, and the unexpected twist far darker than he ever imagined? The answer would come soon. But for now, the Tycoon was left in the dark, his fate hanging in the balance, as the pieces of the puzzle continued to fall into place. The Tycoon sat in his office, his face a mask of frustration and confusion. The walls seemed to close in on him, the weight of his empire pressing down harder with every unanswered question. The search for his bride had led him nowhere, and with each passing hour, his control over the situation seemed to slip further from his grasp. It had been days since she disappeared, and each lead, every shadow of hope, had turned out to be a dead end. But the question she left behind, "Do you even know who I am?" haunted him. Was it more than just a challenge? A frustrated cry from someone trapped in a gilded cage? He had spent his entire life building walls around himself, walls that kept everyone at arm's length. And now, he was staring at the very thing he had feared most: vulnerability. In the quiet of his office, the door creaked open. It wasn't his partner, or one of the hired investigators. No, this time it was someone he hadn't expected. Someone who, until now, had been a mere whisper in the background of his world, his own mother. She stepped into the room, her face softer than it had been in years. There was a quiet sadness in her eyes, but also a strength that hadn't been there before. "You're not going to find her," she said simply, taking a seat across from him. His heart skipped a beat. "What do you mean?" "You've always been so focused on controlling everything," she continued, her voice steady but heavy with years of experience. "But some things can't be controlled. Some things you can't even understand. You've been treating this marriage like a deal, like a transaction, but there's more to it. There's always more to it." Her words cut deeper than he cared to admit. She wasn't wrong. From the beginning, he had seen the marriage as a way to expand his empire, a perfect way to consolidate power and build something even more unshakable. He had thought the bride was just a tool, someone who could help him get what he wanted. But now, with the pieces of the puzzle starting to fall into place, he began to wonder if he had underestimated everything the stakes, even himself. "You've been blind," his mother continued, "and you're not the only one." At that moment, the door opened again. This time, it was his business partner, his closest confidant, and the man who had been by his side through thick and thin. He stepped into the room, but his usual confident demeanor was gone. The weight of something unspoken hung between them. Without a word, he handed the Tycoon a small envelope. The Tycoon opened it carefully, as if handling something fragile. Inside was a set of photos of his bride, not in the luxurious settings he was accustomed to, but in places he never would have expected, meetings with figures from rival companies, shadowy figures in dark corners, and most shockingly, a photograph of her speaking to a lawyer, a man who was known to be involved in some very unsavory business deals. His heart dropped. The realization hit him like a punch to the gut. His bride wasn't just running away from him. She was orchestrating something far more dangerous, something that could tear apart everything he had built. The marriage, which he had thought was a simple alliance, was part of a much larger scheme, one that involved power plays he hadn't even considered. It wasn't just about wealth. It wasn't just about securing the future. It was about control, and the game had always been far more complex than he had imagined. The partner stood silently as the Tycoon processed the photographs, but there was something else in his eyes now. An unreadable expression, one that suggested he knew more than he had let on. "You've been outplayed," he said softly, his voice almost pitying. "And now, we're all in deeper than you think." For a long moment, the Tycoon said nothing. The empire he had worked so hard to build, the relationships he had forged, they all seemed so fragile now, so tenuous. His mind raced, going back to every decision, every deal, every conversation that had led to this moment. He could no longer ignore the signs. His bride had been playing him from the start. But why? Was it revenge? Was it ambition? Or something more? As the hours passed, the Tycoon began to piece together a theory, one that made his blood run cold. What if this marriage wasn't just about gaining power? What if it was about taking it away? What if she had always planned to use him as a stepping stone, only to betray him in the end, seizing everything he had worked for in a calculated move of her own? But as he sat with these dark thoughts, he realized there was still one piece of the puzzle he didn't understand. She had left, yes, but why had she disappeared without a trace? Was she afraid of something? Or had she already gotten what she needed? The Tycoon stood abruptly, the sudden movement startling both his mother and his partner. I need to find her. I need to end this before it goes any further. I don't think you understand, the partner said, stepping closer. You can't just fix this. She's gone too far. But the Tycoon wasn't listening. The game was no longer about wealth or power. It was about survival. His survival. And if it meant exposing the dark secrets of those around him, he would do it. He didn't know where to start, but he did know this. He couldn't do it alone. He needed to get to the heart of the conspiracy, to uncover the truth, no matter the cost. The stakes were higher than he had ever imagined, and there was no turning back. He turned to his partner. Help me find her, and help me understand why. The partner hesitated, but the look in the Tycoon's eyes made it clear that this was no longer about loyalty. It was about saving everything: their business, their legacy, and their very lives. And so, together, they embarked on a new kind of hunt, one that would take them deeper into the world of power, betrayal, and hidden motives than they had ever dreamed. The Tycoon was no longer just fighting for control of his empire. He was fighting to reclaim his life from the shadows that had been pulling the strings all along. But as they followed the trail of clues, the deeper they got, the more they realized that the line between friend and foe had never been blurrier. And as they drew closer to the truth, they discovered something they hadn't expected. The game was far from over. The Tycoon had underestimated the true nature of the people around him, and now he was about to learn that there are no winners in a game where everyone is playing for keeps. The final confrontation loomed, and with it, a question that would determine everything. Could the Tycoon outsmart the very people who had been playing him all along? Or was he already too far gone, his empire already crumbling beneath him? With the pieces of the puzzle finally falling into place, there was only one thing left to do: face the inevitable and deal with the consequences. The end was near, and it would come with a twist that no one saw coming.